Tourism Video 6, How can Majorca develop sustainably? We know that approximately 80% of the GDP of Majorca or the Balearic Islands comes from tourism. Therefore, it's vital that Majorca develops carefully and sustainably. Remember, sustainably is how to use something without using it up, damaging it, or polluting the environment. This is a really popular exam question, so make sure you have plenty of specific detail, and the work we do on Monday will make sure that you do. So here's our island. We have our caves of Drach in the east, we have our mountains in the west, we have our beautiful beaches in Valcudia and Palma. We have been through all of the human and physical attractions and some of the impacts as well. One of the things that we really need to discuss is a big impact, and it's getting worse in Majorca. Talking about water, or actually lack of it. A small island like Majorca must be very careful with its water supplies. For all those hotels with swimming pools and high numbers of tourists, and the demands for clean drinking water are really high. If you're thinking there's an extra 10 to 20 million people on your island each year, you're going to need an awful lot more water. Now, most of the water they have comes from an underground supply called an aquifer. Aquifers occur in rock where the rock has tiny little holes that store water, and it's extracted and pumped up. This is how London gets its water and how bits of Mexico City get theirs. It's normally a very effective way of getting water because it's replenished by rainwater. However, if your supply is not as good and your demand exceeds what you can produce, or your weather changes, or you have periods of a dry spell, your aquifer will not be replenished properly and you will end up with problems. Once you pump the water out, the water table of usable water drops. You then get salt water seeping in, especially in small islands like Majorca. Now, they started pumping the water out mostly for farming. They've now decided they want to use it for what's called irrigation, basically watering big gardens in weekend houses, hotels, second homes, and golf courses. This is adding massively to the amount of water that Majorca needs on a yearly basis. So once this salty water seeps into the water table, it poisons the water. It makes it taste salty and slimy to the point where sometimes during some parts of the year, the World Health Organization has said that people can't drink it. It's not fit for purpose. And in some cases, drinking water had to be imported from the mainland. So in 2001, the hydrological plan for the Balearic Islands was introduced, which included increased employment of desalination facilities to compensate for the high water demand in an appropriate way. What this means is that they're going to boil vast quantities of salty water, and they're going to collect the steam, and they're going to get the steam to condense in a different container. What that does is the salt water is left behind, and you get pure water evaporated as steam, which you then condense and collect elsewhere. To heat that much water to produce drinking water for 20 million people is going to cost an awful lot of money in electricity, which is made by fossil fuel. So that's not very environmentally friendly. Yes, it produces lots and lots of lovely drinking water, but it's not environmentally friendly and it's not very sustainable. And that's what we really need. We really need some ideas of how to make Majorca sustainable. So plan 1 is the all year round holiday destination. By spreading the events out in the spring and the autumn and getting people to come in the winter, rather than cramming all those holiday makers into the summer season, putting excess pressure on the system, it then spreads everything out to a much more manageable size. With the problems they've had with the water, they've also had problems with electricity, and they've had power cuts because so many people putting pressure on the system, it's just not coping. So they've got events all the way through the year to spread out the tourists. Number 2, down on the farm, agro-tourism. Instead of cramming all your tourists into high-rise ugly hotels down by the beach, You spread them out across the island in converted barns and small hotels and villages for get away from it all breaks. You spread the money out across the island, you spread the tourists out across the island, you don't have the same concentration. However, it has to be controlled. Otherwise, you have all these tourists wandering around the countryside, trashing the place. Plan 3. Using local goods. Promoting locally made crafts. Local people earn more money from the tourists rather than buying cheap tat that was made abroad. Now, the government is now stressing that hotels have to use local produce in their kitchens to cut down on food miles. It reduces the carbon emissions used to transport the food and supports the local farmers and growers by putting money in their pockets. However, there is no way that Majorca can supply every single bit of food that the kitchens need, especially with the water problem. So food is still imported, but it's less than it used to be. Plan 4, rebranding. Gone are the days when Majorca was seen as the party island. It now wants a different type of clientele. It's now insisting that the only new hotels that are built must be 4 or 5 star, and they're promoting the growth of small, really expensive and comfortable, luxurious hotels in the hope that fewer tourists will come, but they'll be the ones that spend more money and improve the reputation of the island. Number 5, the new treatment works. As disgusting as it sounds, they have opened a new sewage treatment works that consumes 46,000 cubic metres of waste a day. The factory runs on the biogas that's produced by the process, so it doesn't use any electricity, which is fantastic for the environment. And after zapping the sewage with ultraviolet rays, the water is in fact drinkable. Don't know if I'd fancy it myself, but I can understand the principle. So it's environmentally friendly completely. It doesn't require you to burn fossil fuels to do anything to it. It produces its own electricity. And it produces water. Now, although the water isn't used in the water system, it's not like Singapore where it is, it's used for watering crops. So that reduces the big problem that we had back at the start, where 60% of the water coming out of the aquifer was being used to water crops. So if all the sewage water that is cleaned is used for gardens and crops, then the pure aquifer water can be used for drinking. Let me go back to desalinisation. Desalinisation is a really good process, but you have to have a lot of money to do it. In this case, they're using reverse osmosis, where water's forced through tiny, tiny, tiny holes, and the salt comes out and the water is left pure. But it requires so much fossil fuels to be burnt for electricity. It is not a perfect solution. In class on Monday, we will be looking at these plans in a bit more detail, and you will be becoming the masters of the plans. Look forward to seeing you then.